feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in. Time to turn to medical matters with the doctor. You're looking very dapper this morning, dude.
Thanks, bud.
Thank you, man. Thank you for putting your best foot forward because we've got a very important discussion today. The Department of Health, it launches its second campaign for this year, targeting human papilloma virus. I've got it right this time. Now, the aim is to get as many girls in grade 4 to get vaccinated as possible. HPV is extremely common. Approximately 80% of women will contract the virus at some point in their lives. And as always, we love to have the doc here to break it down for us. And please, we want anyone and everyone to weigh in on this conversation. No sacred cows when it comes to our medical discussions. 021-430-9881. If you've got any questions, here's the tome of all knowledge when it comes to medical. This refers to a group of viruses, am I right? I know very little about
a family.
this.
Let's call them a family.
A family of viruses. Just give us a bit of background here, broaden our scope.
Yeah, so the human papilloma virus is what it's called. It's got a numerous amount of subtypes, and each subtype is associated with a different clinical outcome or manifestation. 6 and 11, for example, are associated with warts specifically. 16 and 18 are particularly associated with cervical cancer. And obviously HPV, putting stress on the skin of the cervix over time, causes radical changes in those cells at that junction, leading to cervix cancer. And that's why those high-risk 16 and 18 subtypes need to be prevented before they actually become before we actually become infected with them. And that's what the virus looks like right there.
As we break it right down, it looks like a beast of a virus. When we look at health complications that it causes, obviously the cervical cancer is first and foremost and why we want to get young girls vaccinated now. But what other health complications can be associated?
Sure. So the other subtypes are associated as being part of the forerunners or pre-stages of other cancers. Throat cancer, for example, mouth and lip cancer is associated. Gastric and stomach cancer as well. There's an association with HPV. And, you know, the warts that we see on our hands and feet, often you get plantar's warts or you get palmar warts, for example. You know, they're benign warts. They're not cancerous at all. Those are subtypes, and those are low-grade or low-risk infections, and the different ways that people deal with those kind of warts. But when it comes to genital warts specifically, you can imagine the risk, even during birth, the birth process, of spreading the virus to your newborn child is there from the start. So people need to know that they've got it. If they've got certain high-grade subtypes or high-risk subtypes, they need to obviously be aware of that and plan the birth accordingly.
Does it only affect women? And I'll ask you a completely
No,
ignorantly.
it affects men as well. So men can also be carriers of the virus. As such, you know, we often associate it with women only because we do the pap smears,
because it exhibits in women far more radically.
And cervix cancer being obviously the highest risk of a deadly, killing type of, you know, after effect of the virus.
For something that affects so many of us, especially South Africa's women, I think it's vital, yes, that we get vaccinated, but I think it's so important that we educate ourselves. We're going to continue on that path. 021-430-9881 if you've got any questions that you'd like to pose to the doc.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Dr. Darren Green is here for our regular Tuesday health chat. We're talking human papilloma virus and how many of us are affected by it. And the need for vaccinations. Of course, government launching a great campaign to get as many girls in the age of, or that age bracket of grade 4 to get vaccinated as possible. Talk me through the campaign. Why particularly this age, and how effective is the vaccination in stopping the spread?
Absolutely. So the highest risk that you have, obviously, of spreading it is once you've already contracted the virus. We want to hit hard early and prevent people contracting that virus from the start. So before they become sexually active, point number one. Point number two is obviously to look at the long-term studies that have occurred and that they've rolled out in Australia as well in terms of the vaccination program. We have to see that the benefit is unbelievable in preventing cervical cancer. So we need to get in at the age of 9 particularly, because that's the highest efficacy. That's when the immunization or the vaccine is most effective. So before exposure at a young age due to seroconversion and also the immune status of a young child. However, we're only advocating it for girls at the moment, and we obviously should look at doing it in boys too.
Why is that? Why? surely we are shooting ourselves in the foot by not addressing the problem holistically. We are only dealing with one half of the population when it can be contracted by both.
Yes, 100%. So I think the focus obviously is looking at deaths associated with cervical cancer specifically, and that being obviously the high-risk group in terms of it having negative outcomes. The benign forms of the subtypes of HPV obviously are less harmful as such. But what we need to be doing is looking at eradicating the virus completely. And as I said earlier, men can also be carriers of the virus.
And I suppose there is a cost implication, logistical implication. We do
100%.
understand that. I think most importantly here, we need parents then to be proactive and make sure you almost want to make it a mandatory vaccination that they're going to get their young daughters vaccinated. Talk us through the process, demystify that for us.
Yes, so I think, understanding the vaccination, the fact that it needs to be given in a series of 3 injections, basically, an initial one and then a follow-up booster and then the final one. It's basically injected into the arm. It's a very, very, very quick injection. And just as any other vaccine, basically, the local area of inflammation and tenderness might occur on that part of the body. But also understanding that in terms of the systemic benefits down the line, it's like giving your body a photograph of the virus, saying, yeah, this is police file. So when you actually are
on the top 10 most wanted list.
That's right. When you're exposed to it, your body is then pre-warned and has an immune response all ready to go in and obviously combat it.
Okay, well, we're going to get into some of, we've had some brilliant gems already. We're going to get into some of those kind of misconceptions about the HPV or human papilloma virus. We want to hear from you as well. If you've got any questions or anything you'd like to weigh in, 021 430 9881.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to our medical discussion with Dr. Green. We are talking about HPV, and we've had some great questions coming through. We were talking specifically about the vaccination, how important it is to get young girls. And we know that they are not the only ones affected by it, but it exhibits much more radically within women, obviously leading in some cases to cervical cancer. We've got some great questions coming through here. First of all, from Aisha Mohammed, she's asking a couple of questions, actually. What are the side effects of the injection? How will it affect our little girls' bodies? And is it the same dosage that we'd give to adults?
Yes.
Brilliant questions. Thanks,
Very
Aisha.
good question. Basically, it affects a local area of inflammation after the injection. So you could have, for a few days, up to a week even, a bit of a red, swollen patch where the injection
And they
site
inject in the
was.
arm, yeah?
Correct, and that could obviously cause a little bit of pain and discomfort. It's like, obviously, a local reaction in the skin that you're getting there. Remember that you're giving the vaccine, obviously, for your immune system to actually be exposed to certain protein molecules from the virus itself. But by no means is that going to give you the cancer or give you an infection.
It's not a cure.
No,
it's
certainly not a
purely
cure.
as a preventative measure.
As to monitor it. And there, obviously, that's George Papanicolaou, the guy that discovered the Pap smear, as being important in picking up early detection of cervical cancer and differentiation of those cells.
Leading on to that, she said, how will it affect little girls' bodies? You're administering this vaccination in a young girl's, a very developmental stage in a young girl's life, both mentally, emotionally, and
100%.
physically.
A lot of parents are scared. Am I giving my child a license to go forth and be sexually active?
Yeah.
And the answer is no. What parents need to understand even more so is that the average age of a first sexual encounter for children is actually under the age of 10. In our country, and we need to know that as parents, understanding that children are experimenting, looking, inquisitive, curious about, obviously, these kinds of things. So the sooner, obviously, that you do it, the better your little one and your girl's chances. You're giving it to prevent cervical cancer down the line. And I think that's where the value comes in.
Now, the question coming from Liesel Nancy, is it dangerous? Is there a cure for it? And does it only occur in females? We've covered a little bit of this already, but we know that, yes, men can carry the virus as well, and that there are more severe forms of it. Is there
Correct.
a cure for the more extreme case? We know there's no cure for the virus itself, but is taking the vaccination going to help you with the more severe, if you've already got the virus in your system?
Yeah, so you might have, let's say, subtype 6 and 11 in your system. In which case, taking, obviously, the vaccination would help you, preventing you from getting subtype 16 and 18, which are the higher risk associated with cancer, for example. So that's what we need to understand about the vaccinating process. Obviously, with men, what they must understand is that they can develop things like throat cancer, Michael Douglas is a typical example of someone that caused a lot of stir around HPV and the association with throat cancer.
We're going to get into how it is spread in our next chat. We've got one more segment to go. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for those great questions. 021 430 9881 if you'd like to connect with us with any questions at all.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
So we're going to continue our chat now, round it off. We're talking about HPV. The doctor has actually blown my mind with how much you know about this, and I think how important it is for us as parents to know about this in order to protect young ladies, especially from ultimately those severe strains that can lead to cervical cancer. We've got Isanda now joining us on the line. Thank you so much for connecting with us all the way from the Eastern Cape this morning. Isanda, very good morning. First of all, your comment or your question for the doctor?
My comment is, good day to the doctor, good morning to the doctor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my question is, can I still get the vaccination? I am 40 years of age. Is it too late or can I still get it?
Very, very good question.
And a great question. So what Asanda would need to know is that if she does her routine pap smear, they would pick up the presence of, obviously, through liquid cytology, they would pick up the presence of the HPV virus. If she doesn't have the virus, sure, then definitely it would still have benefit for her if she hasn't been exposed to it by now. You know, 80% of females
will at some point,
at some stage of their lives have been exposed and then have the virus itself. So if there isn't a demonstrated presence of HPV, certainly I would consider taking the vaccination still. The benefits obviously are before you reach the age where you actually are exposed to the virus, that's when you need it most. Remember also the subtypes are important. The ones that are high-risk subtypes, like 16 and 18,
will they be able to pick that up from a pap
They
smear?
can pick that up and do
So I think that is the
tests.
most important, I think, part of that process as a lady, that you do need to know exactly your status.
Yeah.
Something that we know, is very prevalent when we deal with a lot of viruses
100%.
in this country, and that's something I think that we need to take the stigma away from it. And ultimately, it's about holistic health. How often should a woman be getting a pap smear to be able to kind of know fully where she stands in this regard?
Yeah, I think after the age of 30, every 5 years. So that's important. It also depends on what happens in terms of if they find anything abnormal on the pap smear. Then they'll recommend to you for the different grade of lesions, whether you need to follow up within a 6-month period or a 12-month period, if they demonstrate any atypical cells or pre-runners, so to say, of cervix cancer. So your gynae would give you good advice there based on the cytology report as to exactly when you should basically follow up.
And for all women, you want to have a fantastic relationship with your gynae that is a lifelong relationship that you need. At Dr.Green is where you can find him on social media. If you've got any more questions, hit him on his timeline. He does actually respond because he's an absolute gentleman. Thank you so much. You've taught me so much. Hopefully this has been helpful for you at home. Most importantly, parents, get your daughters vaccinated at school. Give them permission. It's 3 vaccinations and it could ultimately save them in the future.